So in part one, we talked about the appearance of the dream and the speaker um, of the dreamer. And um, we are supposed to attend to what the Rood says. So this is the part that we're supposed to pay attention to. This dreamer facing uncertainty, this is what he hears next. So in the second part of this poem, in the majority of the lines, I believe they are lines 27 through 121. So we have a new speaker, and that is the cross or the tree, the rood, is our new kind of character who is providing us with our instruction. And the the in this poem, the cross is personified, but it's a specific kind of personification called prosopopoeia, which is where we not only give human characteristics to something, but we give a human voice to an inanimate object. So there are two kind of there are a couple different parts to the words of the cross, and part of that is his history, and there are kind of two layers to his history. We've got this human-like talking tree who's telling us about how he came to be a cross. So he describes being cut down on the edge of the forest by powerful enemies when the Lord of mankind climbs up above him. So he's describing he's being cut down and carried away by soldiers, by powerful enemies. Essentially, he's setting us up for a battle, or he's describing this kind of setup to the crucifixion as it would be described as a battle. He is taken hostage, he is captured. And then he moves into talking about the crucifixion. And keep in mind that the crucifixion is one of those mysteries of faith. It's the fourth of the sorrowful mysteries. So he's describing the crucifixion as if it were a battle. He's captured by the enemies. And Jesus all of a sudden kind of comes and joins in this battle. He climbs on top of him. And the Rood says that once they are united, once they have been, they are together in this battle, that I did not dare act against the Lord's word when he was being tortured. He fights against his inclination to destroy those kind of enemies. So what we have here is a description of Jesus as this kind of courageous soldier in battle with the Rood, who traditionally, and this is where we kind of get those kind of rewriting the story of heroism. Traditionally, like any good warrior, you would be meant to fight. And that's the inclination of the Rood. He says, lines 37, he says, although I might have destroyed the foes, I stood in place. Then this young man stripped himself. That was God Almighty, strong and courageous. He climbed up on the high gallows, brave in the sight of many, as he set out to redeem mankind. I trembled when the man embraced me. I dare not bow down to earth, stood to the surface of the ground, but I had to stand fast. I want to fight. I want to defeat the people who are trying to do harm to this courageous soldier, but I can't. I have to fight against that inclination. I have to submit to the will of my Lord because the Lord doesn't want me to do anything. Stand fast. Don't fight. Because the Christ soldier, isn't fighting either. He is willingly losing this battle to redeem mankind. And he stands, I mean, I think that this is kind of interesting because by not fighting, he's obeying his Lord. Christ wants and needs this earthly defeat in order to redeem mankind. That this loss in battle isn't a loss, but a win for him, and in turn, it's a win for humanity. The description of the crucifixion continues, and I think that this is so beautifully done. And what's interesting is that when the time that this was written, there was this kind of controversy going on within the church that the poet or the translator seems to be keenly aware of, and that to describe Christ's body being harmed was a form of heresy. So rather than describing Christ as someone, the physical torture of Christ, he describes it by having the cross's body take on that physical torture. He says that they drove nails into me. The dents of those wounds can still be seen, open marks of malice. But I did not dare maul any of them in return. They mocked both of us. I was moistened all over with blood after he had sent up his spirit. So the cross is functioning here as a proxy for Christ's suffering. And in turn, Christ is suffering, the cross is suffering. And it really kind of humanizes the cross and establishes a stronger connection between the Rood and the dreamer. And this is kind of interesting, and because there's this connection between the dreamer and the Rood, it's something that we too can relate to, because the cross is responsible in part for causing the suffering of Jesus. I mean, that's what he's nailed to. So in some ways, he's both in the long run, he's helping, but by helping, he's also hurting, and physically hurting. So he is responsible in part for causing the suffering, and he feels the suffering too. And it's interesting because if you think about it, the cross as a man suffering, we can kind of relate to that, but because Christ suffers, we don't have to, so to speak. So that it saves us from that kind of sin. So I think it's interesting that by humanizing the cross, they are united in that struggle, that suffering. So the view of the crucifixion comes from a place of intimacy, of privilege. He's the closest person to see that kind of redeeming act for everyone. And I think it's beautifully done. So, anyways, after the spirit of the brave soldier leaves, he's buried, and he look at, I really want you guys to focus on the language that the poet uses when describing his burial. He says that in this kind of description of um, his death, he said, "On that mountain I endured many cruel happenings. I saw the God of hosts direly stretched out. Shades of darkness had clouded over the corpse of the Lord. The shining radiance shadows went forth, dark under clouds. All creation wept, mourning the king's fall." And it's like there's a death of a earthly king. So it's interesting that he's using that kind of earthly language that an Anglo-Saxon audience would understand. And he's saying that people come from all over, all around, that he too is burdened with grief, and the warriors, they all gather around, and he is buried, and all of the people around him are I'm looking at line 78. They began singing a lay or song of sorrow, warriors sad as night was falling when they wished to journey back weary far from the famous Lord. He rested with fellow followers, and they build him this tomb, and they lay him in it. And just like the king is buried, so is the cross. Like a faithful soldier is buried beside him. And like Christ, he's dug up, he's resurrected. And so we have in this this one scene the kind of various stages of Christ's suffering, through the agony in the agony of the garden, or being cut down in the forest, the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion, the burial in the tomb, the resurrection. And this is his way of really recounting the most important moment in Christianity, right? The most important moments of the New Testament, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. It was what really separates Christianity from Judaism. But anyways, it's putting the single most important event in Christianity in terms that an Anglo-Saxon can understand and accept. So the cross is then resurrected, and it becomes a symbol for men. And because Jesus suffered, because the cross suffered, Jesus is in heaven. Because he suffered, the cross can be glorified in heaven as well. So if we look at the cross's resurrection, I promise I'm wrapping up. I'm good. He says, he says that he was buried deep in the pit, but thanes of the Lord, friends, learned about me, adorned me with gold and silver. Now, man so dear to me, you may understand that I have gone through grievous sufferings, terrible sorrows. Now the time has come so that far and wide men worship me everywhere on earth, and all creation pray to this sign. On me the Son of God suffered a time. Therefore I now tower in glory under heaven, and I may heal any one of those in awe of me. So he's saying that he too has been redeemed through Christ's acts, through Christ's passion. So, I want to talk very briefly about uh, the lines 86 through 93, because it really kind of gives us that theme of transformation when he says, long ago I became, it's kind of like retelling his history again. He was a tree in the forest that was fallen, and that's significant because it also mirrors man's fall, man's plight, original sin. And that further allows us to connect to him, or the dreamer to connect to him. He becomes the most cruel punishment, he becomes this kind of instrument of cruel punishment, most hated by men. He embraces Christ on the cross, and he has redemption. He is exalted and lives in glory. And all over, because we see the sign of the cross, we too can have that same redemption. So he's really showing is showing the transformation. He was once a tree who was turned into this instrument of torture. Now he's a sign of glory and redemption. And that's the kind of transformation that we as humans and we as people should take from his story. So he's seen as a human. We see his transformation, and this is something that the dreamer is meant to identify with, because the dreamer has identified with this story. Now he can really kind of take in the last words of the cross, which I'm not going to read through it all, but in the final words of this vision, or in the final moments of this dream, we get a command, or the dreamer gets a command. And this command is a mixture of the Great Commission, Matthew 16 through 32, when Jesus directs his disciples to go and teach all nations in the name of the Father and the Son, baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them all things I have commanded, right? And that mirrors what the Rood says. He says, now I command you, my man so dear, to tell others the events you have seen. So like Jesus's command for the disciples to go and tell people about him, the cross is telling the dreamer, go and tell people my story, which is essentially Jesus's story. And it's also a mixture of the Nicene Creed, which basically establishes the foundations of the Christian church. And basically it describes the mystery of the Holy Trinity, how God is three persons in one. But the words that can be found in the creed and in this poem is that it's kind of the journey of Christ's sacrifice. The part where he says, there he has tasted death, yet the Redeemer arose with his great might to help mankind. Then he rose to heaven. He will come again to this middle earth on Judgment Day. And basically his kingdom will have no end. So we get these commands that very much mirror what the path of salvation, so to speak. So he's basically saying, if you do as I tell you to, if you go and tell people about me, if you model my example, you have nothing to fear. There is no more uncertainty. You too can live in the glory of heaven. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up with the final part where we talk about the closing of the poem. So once again, stay tuned, and I promise it won't be a long one.